Hello and welcome to the JackCast, the Swansea City podcast. I am Guto and with me, as usual, we have Steve Carroll. How are you, Steve?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very good. Excellent, in fact, because we have actual live football to discuss. Because after 3 months of waiting, hanging around, watching old matches, recording nostalgic podcasts, we finally got live football to look forward to. Project Restart gets back underway this week, and the Swans will get back into the swing of things away at Middlesbrough. Steve, it's weird, isn't it, that we are actually discussing proper football again. We're not talking about the John Hollins era. We're not talking about Paulo Sousa and Shefki Kuchi misses. We're not talking about fantastic victories in the past and gut-wrenching defeats. We are actually looking forward to a proper game where we do not know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit strange, really, doesn't it? The new normal, I suppose, where we're going to play again, obviously for the first time in over 3 months. I mean, obviously the off season is usually 3 months, isn't it? So that says a lot, really, for how long it's been. But I think if we're honest, given the way the world is right now, it probably feels like a lot longer. But it's I suppose it's good to be back. Whether we'll still be saying that 2:15 on Saturday is highly debatable. But it's it is good that we're going to have something to watch on the weekend and hopefully something to shout about, obviously.
Yeah, obviously that's what we're hoping for, because if anybody's looking forward to this weekend, that kind of enthusiasm can be dampened very quickly if the Swans don't turn up. But these circumstances are totally unprecedented. No football fan has ever been through anything like this, in this country at least. We've been away for 3 months and suddenly we're just meant to get back into action and continue the season as if it never ended. But there are no fans allowed inside the stadiums. All the teams are going through these strict testing regimes and social distancing away from the pitch, etc. And I don't know about you, Steve, but for me, it feels like a sort of a new season almost, because we've had this long gap, because we've been away for so long, and suddenly you feel like, okay, we're starting afresh. Which is strange because we've played 37 games already this season. The Swans are 3 points off the playoff spot, and actually for most of this season we've actually been complaining about this pod, about the standard of football, about the fact that we have to watch such awful football, and yet kind of coming back into the swing of things, I can't wait. And for some reason, I have this blind optimism that the Swans are going to really kick off and that we're going to start off really well, that our best players are really going to turn up, that we're going to get some good wins, and we're going to make a real playoff charge. That's totally baseless. It's not based on anything that's gone on before this, so far this season. It's just this blind optimism and excitement that comes with the return of football after 3 months out.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I certainly don't share that blind optimism. But that's not to say that you're wrong. Obviously, I mean it does feel very different, really, in terms of what's going to happen. I mean, no one, the Swans, to the best of my knowledge, have never played a game behind closed doors, and I'm assuming it's the same for most of the other clubs. And it'll be, it does certainly, I would say, probably change how things are going to pan out. And I mean, if you look at, obviously, teams are now going to have certain players back to fitness and all this type of thing. So, I'm sure the league table will end in a different way to what it would have done if everything had played out as normal. So, and I think from my point of view, I really couldn't see the Swans getting into the playoffs at that stage. So, you never know. We may have a slightly better chance now with these different set of circumstances, because it is difficult to tell how everybody is going to react to it. I mean, I've got my own views in terms of, I think it should suit the better sides, because if you've got an example of obviously if you go somewhere where maybe the side are not great, but then the crowd are on top of you and it's intimidated, then that can sometimes win you points. I mean, if I'd give an example, probably we've got to play Leeds, haven't we, in a few weeks, and I'd feel a lot more confident of the result if we had a full house there rather than if it's played behind closed doors. So, obviously I could be completely wrong for these things, but that's my initial thing, is that it should suit the better sides, really, because there's less levelers. But you just don't know, do you? It's certainly going to throw things up in the air a bit more, and it's the main thing really from my point of view is it is good that the season is going to play out to a conclusion in the right way, given that they believe it's safe to do so, because no one really wants to see things wrapped up by points per game or anything null and voided, do they? So
and that's I take it, Steve, that was your perspective all along, that we should do everything to finish the season, because I was pretty vocal the whole way through that, if it should have been an absolute last resort to finish the season prematurely. And the thing is, with the Championship, there's so much money involved that if they had just scrapped the season and either, promoted a few teams and relegated a few from the Premier League, or, kept everybody in their prospective leagues for the next season. I mean, the legal ramifications of that would have been absolutely massive. The Premier League, the Football League, they would have faced just a mountain of lawsuits, and there was no way that was going to be allowed to happen unless absolutely necessary. It's different in League One, League Two. There's less money there. There's still the prospect of legal action, but there's not as much riding on promotion and relegation as you have in the Championship. And that's why I think it just had to be restarted. Not really for clubs like the Swans, who, perhaps have an outside chance of getting into the playoffs, but more so for the teams who were either right down the bottom or right up the top, really. Those were the teams who had such a high stake in this and had made plans dependent on their form so far this season. They would have demand that it would have had to have been resolved really on the football pitch to avoid any kind of legal action. And that's why I think it was important that it got sorted out on the playing field in a nice, neat and tidy way, and not in the courtrooms in just the messiest and most unpleasant form possible.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's obviously there's been things mentioned, isn't there, in the divisions below us, where I think Tranmere, obviously, if they're not happy that they're going to get relegated, and I can understand that, but it's a difficult one really. I think the most laughable one was Ipswich, who basically suggested that the playoffs should be extended as far as anyone who wants to take part in them, given that they're in 11th place. Obviously, there's no self-interest to that one, but
it's a bold move by Ipswich. I'll be honest.
They've obviously thought nothing to lose other than just their entire integrity.
I love the idea.
A laughing stock, aren't they?
I love the idea of Southend getting relegated, but also saying, yeah, might as well get into the playoffs as well. If Ipswich can do it, then why can't we? That would have been an entertaining one. Ipswich with definitely the ballsiest proposal for how we resolve this season.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's Peterborough that were a bit unlucky. I think they were in 6th, weren't they, in League One, and obviously because of the points per game, they've dropped a place and have missed out. So I do have sympathy with those teams. It is frustrating, but I can't be too sympathetic, because I think in this current situation, the most important thing is that clubs survive, and I think it's very unpractical in general to unfurlough players and play without fans in the lower divisions where they just don't have the money to basically just to keep it going. So I think they have done the right thing, but anyone that basically has missed out very narrowly or has gone down because of it, I do sympathise, because I think we'd all be frustrated if it was us. But at the same time, I think it'd be good if people took more the attitude of Port Vale, because I think the Port Vale owners said that they were 8th in League Two, so they won off the playoffs, but they obviously didn't want to void the season, or should I say go to points per game, but they just felt it was unrealistic to carry on, so reluctantly did decide that to vote in favour of ending the season, even though they wouldn't get playoffs. And I think we just need more people to have that type of attitude, rather than Ipswich's just complete self-interest and pathetic suggestion, really. I mean, because all it does is just make you a laughing stock and annoys people. So I just think it's really poor that a club like that would do it. And then when you see what Port Vale's attitude was, you just think everybody should be taking the attitude more of survival for everybody, rather than just one little bit of self-interest for their own club, really. And I think that's what I want to see more of. And I suppose it's good that someone like Port Vale did have that attitude, and it's a shame that others didn't.
Yeah, and I think we as Swansea City fans can probably speak without that self-interest as well, because I mean, we're outsiders for the playoffs, and we're even further outsiders for promotion. So we've got something to play for this season, but we're not right in the thick of things, and so we can probably speak pretty openly and pretty in a pretty balanced way really about what's to come. In terms of what's to come, Steve, we've got all our loans back for the remaining matches, the 9 remaining matches that we've got coming up in the space of 33 days. We're going to need all those loans, aren't we? Because 9 matches in 33 days is an absolute mammoth schedule. And I'll be honest, I don't really get the rush to get things done so quickly. Surely, if the idea is we get everything done ready before the start of next season, can't next season be pushed forward a little bit further just to accommodate and make it, give us a little bit more time to finish? Because there are going to be playoffs at the end of this season as well. So it's an absolutely packed schedule, and you'd imagine it's going to wreak havoc with physio rooms across the country.
Yeah, you just think, like, with next season, I mean, how I stand on that is I just think they need to cut something slightly. Like, I give an example, the Nations League internationals. Like, why can't you just, like, postpone that until, like, the 2 years' time? It's not an essential tournament, for example. Because, I mean, if you did that, then that would free up 3 weekends, basically, in for the rest of the year. And that would be, like, a big help. And you just think, can the stuff be cut, even if it's just a one-off? Like, could the Champions League just be like a straight knockout, for example, rather than having a group stage, just to cut things down as a one-off, if that makes sense? Because I just don't see how they're going to squeeze it in.
The thing is, Champions League is going to be difficult just because there's so much money involved. Again, the sponsorship is just massive. There's so much money being made by clubs. I think that's going to probably be difficult. You're really going to struggle to do that kind of thing. I think what's more likely is that we get rid of at least one of the cup competitions for a year, because we know how much clubs care about the League Cup and FA Cup. On the whole, it's not really much, which is wrong, obviously, but they don't, and the sponsorship involved in that is so much smaller. The TV rights deals, etc., so much smaller than Premier League and Champions League. So you'd imagine if something gets scrapped for one season just to make room, it's probably going to be those, I would imagine, as well as the Football League trophy, even though that's turned into total laughing stock anyway. But I'd say those are more likely to go than European competition.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's just that the thing with Europe as well is, obviously, while this virus is still taking hold, you have got to ask in some ways, how practical is it to have traveling abroad? So in some ways you could argue that maybe for a season it just shouldn't take place, and then you just, like, the TV deal just extends by a year and all this kind of thing. I know that's not an ideal solution either, but at the same time, certain countries, if they've got their case numbers are high, you could argue that in England at the moment, maybe English teams are the ones that shouldn't be in it, because obviously that we're a lot higher than other places. So I just think they do have to be, careful. And I think, again, there has to be this everyone's in it together attitude of, we all do have to make some sort of sacrifice, really, because you can't expect players to just play all year round, basically, to catch this thing up, because it is a bit crazy. And, again, with the Euros next summer, why can't they be pushed back slightly? It's meant to start mid-June. Could it start at the end of June? There's no reason why you can't just maneuver stuff around slightly, I don't think. So
because let's face it, players are going to be absolutely shattered by the time the Euros come around next summer, because they will have played, a hectic month of fixtures this summer. They'll have had a reduced break then before the start of the next season, and that will be congested as well, because it'll probably start a little bit later than usual. So between it and then you're going straight into Euros. So, by the time we get to that next summer, players are going to be absolutely shattered, and it's probably not going to have a good impact on the tournament. And it's a stupid tournament anyway, because we're going to it's going to have the added exhaustion of traveling right across Europe to get to games, so it's it's an ideal tournament really for these circumstances. And I agree with you. I think they could do with being pushed back, but those are all debates for another day. But we have to move on now to the actual game that is being played on Saturday at 12:30 and being streamed across the globe to Swansea City fans and Middlesbrough fans everywhere. It is Swansea versus Middlesbrough at the Riverside. First of all, Steve, we got to touch on the fact that we are able to watch the match because it is being streamed, and you and I are able to watch it. Well, I'm not going to say free of charge, but as part of our season tickets, because the club offered various options on what season ticket holders could do. That one of the options was to have a refund, full refund of the remaining games. Another option was to exchange the, I guess, match day tickets for streams of home and away games. Third option, I think, was the lucky dip, which was a bit of a weird one. And then the fourth option, I think, was vouchers for the club shop, if I'm right. I think I'm right in saying that. I mean, what was your response to those options? Are the club being fair on the whole?
Yeah, I don't think anyone can argue with you. I found the lucky dip one a little bit strange and was not one I'd even consider. But I mean, from my point of view, when they said you could stream all the home and away games the rest of the season, I was quite happy with that, to be honest with you, rather than having a refund. I mean, like I know you could argue maybe that you paid to go to the games and you can't, but I think we are in such a circumstance now where it's not the club's fault of the way it's panned out, and it's only a few quid. So I was quite happy with that. And let's be honest, at the moment anyway, in general, your options of what to do, like, most days are pretty limited, aren't they? So if you can have the option of streaming it in the house and it'll take up a couple of hours, then it's a bit of a no-brainer, really, from my point of view. So and I think for some people who maybe are struggling at the moment, that refund option was there, so that covers them, really, doesn't it? And then people think they'd have to be able to make use of anything in the club shop, that was there as well. And so I don't think anybody can really complain about it. And I think if this goes into next season, then there could be an issue, because obviously people have paid a lot of money for next season, and we don't know obviously when fans are going to be able to go to games again. And I mean, I think the issue that we're going to have then is if it becomes a little bit unrealistic to expect fans to make sacrifices if the players are not willing to take cuts rather than deferments, and if those idiots across the pond who are a disgrace don't put their hands in their pocket, because you can't just expect us to be making these sacrifices. I think there does need to be an in this together attitude, and from my point of view, we are going to need to see something from the people who are in far more fortunate positions than us, if we're being honest. So yeah, I think that's how I stand on it right now. We've made our sacrifice, but there's going to have to be something further down the line from others.
Yeah, because obviously we think back to when the takeover happened. One of the big questions was, did they have the means to support the club if worse comes to worse and they hit on hard times, etc. And the answer they gave was yes, that they had the means to do this. I mean, I've not been critical really of them to this point for not dipping into their pockets more, because what I want from a club is for it to be sustainable and for it to actually not rely on an owner to put cash in, etc. But in these circumstances, I mean, the club could be staring at some pretty difficult times coming up, and you'd hope that now is the time really for them to actually step in and be responsible owners and put a bit of their cash in to save their business. And on the four options, yeah, I agree with you. I think they've been more than fair. I think they've given options for every single circumstance, really. There are people who are going to be struggling financially in this period, and they will want a refund to help them get by, and that's fair enough. And then for people like us who can afford to go without that refund, I think a stream's a fair compromise. I think I'm looking forward to watching the games on TV. I know a lot of people have said, that it's not very appealing for them watching games without fans, etc. But I'll be honest, I've been watching the Bundesliga flat out since it returned, and I'm loving it. It's not the same. Can't pretend that it is. It's definitely not as good, but it's pretty good still. It's still football. It's still competitive action. You've still got the usual rough and tumble of a football match. All you don't have there is fans present. So I was pretty happy. We've seen other clubs who've tried to really do a dirty one on their fans, really. Sunderland was saying that if their season resumed They would not be offering full refunds, and if they were offering streams, they would only offer them for home games. So fans would have to pay then to watch the away games, which is a ridiculous one, really. So, other clubs were not as prepared as ours to give fans fair options, but fair play. I think I've not seen a single fan complain about these options, which I think is pretty unprecedented for Swans fans in the modern age. I cannot remember the last time anything happened at the club without somebody complaining. So fair play to the Swans. Very good job. And we're all going to be sitting down at lunchtime to watch the match. Steve, how should we feel about this? Because on paper, if we are looking at form, which is probably something we shouldn't do, these are two teams who weren't in great form going into the break. The Swans had one win in their last 9, which actually surprised me looking back at that period. I know we weren't great for much of that period before the lockdown, but I can't remember us being actually that bad. But one win in 9, and something similar as well for Middlesbrough. I think they've got one win in 12 or something like that, although that was their last game before the lockdown against Charlton. But both teams have been in going through some difficult times and really struggling to get wins. But yeah, I guess the big question is, should we actually look at form, or is this a total restart and anything can happen?
It's difficult to say, it's a total restart. Literally anything can happen because of what we've already seen. It's definitely more of a leveler, obviously, and let's use George Byers as an example. I don't think he's been brilliant this season, but obviously he was out for the rest of the season, and now he's not. So, for example, that'll change things, won't it? But I definitely think it's more open now in terms of what can happen than before, because it did just seem like it was slipping away from us, I would say, around the time of, where football stopped. I mean, obviously, we drew with West Brom 0-0. It was a largely uninspiring game, if I'm honest. Not a bad result, obviously. The game it was
a good defensive performance. I thought that was the best defensive performance we've seen all season, if I'm being honest, at least at the Liberty.
I just never felt we'd score. That's the problem.
No, we never looked like creating anything. But the one thing I will say is that in that West Brom game, I thought I saw some positive signs at the back. I think Woodman only had to make one save all game, which says everything about how good that back four was. So, I mean, that's one aspect which I'm really hoping we can continue going into the matchup at the Riverside, and we'll have Roden back fully fit. Cabango will be alongside him. Norton was playing very well, and even Bidwell had upped his game before.
Well, this is something we should probably discuss, man. I mean, you've mentioned Norton there, and obviously he's one of the players whose contract does expire at the end of the month. And I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, nothing's been said yet in terms of these players. Are they going to play? Are they leaving or anything like that? But obviously we don't know, do we? That's because that definitely is going to potentially weaken us. And you would think that if it's Norton, Van der Horn, Dyer, Routledge, and Mulder. I mean, if all 5 go, I mean, in certain positions we are down to the bare bones, aren't we? But you could then look at it the other way and say, look, I'm not a big fan of these players necessarily. Like, is Mackay, John, Osoro? I think Groningen have said they don't want to buy him, so he's going to be coming back. I mean, are these players then available? Because that's not something that's really been mentioned yet, is it?
No, I've actually not seen anything about this. I mean, I think are contracted until June usually, aren't they, for loan moves? So
everything expires on the 30th of June, doesn't it? So from the 30th of June, like I say, all those that are out of contract, I mean, if they're not getting another one, they could be going in theory. Yeah. And then those ones that are out on loan could be coming back. And then in theory, are they available for us?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen at other clubs, some players whose contracts are coming to an end now are flat out refusing to play. One of whom is Middlesbrough's Daniel Ayala, actually, which could be a bit of a boost for us. He said that he's not, well, it's not his decision, actually. The club have said that he's not going to be playing because he was basically not looking asked. But interestingly, with Ayala, I mean, 78% of Middlesbrough's points this season have come with Ayala in the team, despite him only playing little more. Well, I think he's only played 25 games so far this season, and they've averaged 1.28 points per game with him playing. Only 0.75 team without him in the side. So that should be quite a big loss for them. I'm not Ayala's biggest fan, but in that Middlesbrough team, you'd probably say he's one of their definitely more experienced players and possibly one of their better players. So that's a heck of a loss for them. Hull, we've seen lose 4 players, I think, who are out of contract at the end of the month, including Stephen Kingsley. They've said they're not going to be playing. I mean, Hull do not need those kind of losses in the position that they're in. And Charlton, I think it was Lyle Taylor who started this all off by saying he's hoping to move on at the end of this. He doesn't want an injury risking his chance of a big money move. So it's an interesting one. And see, I mean, what's your opinion on these players who are technically under contract for the first few games anyway, refusing to play because they, don't want to get injured and don't want to scupper a move to another club?
I do see both sides of the argument, if I'm honest. I mean, the fact is, for some of them anyway, they might be getting told themselves that they're not going to get offered another contract, and then they think, well, why should I play? But at the same time, if you're under contract and you're refusing to play, you're breaching the contract. So I think I would take the view that if a Swans player refused to play, they should be fined 2 weeks' wages. And then, obviously, if they just go then at the end of the contract, that's fine. But you can't refuse to play and not expect to take, obviously, a punishment for it. But I do understand why players won't play, if that makes sense. It's a difficult one. It's so unprecedented, really, isn't it? Because obviously, usually football is long since wrapped up by now, isn't it? But I can't say but I don't understand because what if someone does break their leg and then they're unemployable for a year, aren't they? And in this current climate, it's not great, is it?
No, somebody like Lyle Taylor, who has had problems with injuries this season anyway. I know he divides opinion as a person because of his political views, etc. But he's a good player, Lyle Taylor. When he's fully fit, he's a very effective striker. He's had his troubles with injury so far this season. His contract is coming up to an end now. Like you said, if he was to, he could probably get a move to most Championship clubs at the moment, and he'd be getting more money than he is on at Charlton at most clubs. But if he breaks his leg, then suddenly those deals evaporate, and that big money move is off the table, and suddenly he's looking for a new way of making money for the coming months. So. I do actually. I know it's easy to vilify these players and think, oh, they're only thinking about their pockets, etc., and they're not giving the kind of commitment they want. And we as fans obviously want our players to love the club as much as we do. We want them to give absolutely everything for the club, but I think it's only normal for players to actually think about their livelihoods and say, do you know what, the money that these players make doesn't sustain them for the rest of their lives in most cases. They make a very good wage, they really do, but it's not it's not Gareth Bale wages we're talking about here. And if they can find a move that pays a little bit more, and if their career was to end tomorrow, then they would need to find something else to do. So I think actually when you look at it in a human way, you can understand why some players may say, do you know what, I'm going to have to look out for myself here and make this decision. So yeah, I actually understand that. But it's and like you said, when we get to next month, then when contracts do expire, are we going to see players extending their deals for another month, or are they going to say, do you know what, I'm going to be looking for somewhere else to play from now on? It is going to be a tricky one for a club like Swans, which have quite a few players, some of them very important players out of contract. It's going to cause some headaches, isn't it?
Definitely is. And I mean, let's be honest, some of them we're not going to offer contracts to, I wouldn't have thought. Like, I can't see Erwin Mulder getting the contract, because obviously Woodman has been the number one this season, kept him out of the team. And with Stephen Bender likely to come back from Swindon, I'd be amazed if he was staying. I think Nathan Dyer is unlikely to get one. He's not really featured since around January time. So obviously a great servant for this club. Probably should have left a little while ago now, if we're being honest. But I really can't see him getting a new contract, and obviously he'd be on his wages would be quite high, I'd have thought. Routledge, he may get one, I think, and Routledge may, even if it's a low offer, I wouldn't be surprised if he did sign it, because if you think he is, like, I think he's 34, 35, he might just think, I'll stay for one more year. He's close to the retirement age, really, so that'll be in his mind. And then obviously there's always a possibility with somebody like him that he'll get a job behind the scenes at some point. So rather than leaving, he might think that's for the best, just to stay here, even if he doesn't get a great offer money wise. And we're looking at Norton again. I'd have thought we'd like to keep him, but if I'm honest, he'll probably get a better offer from elsewhere. So then it may depend, and if he's here, he might think, well, I'm happy here playing first team football. That might appeal to him. And who's the other one then? I suppose Van der Horn, isn't it? I think I'd be very surprised if he stayed again. I think there could be, a potential offer in his direction, a low one at that, and he's unlikely to sign it, isn't he? So, I think they will go. I think out of all of them, I could only really see Routledge as a likely one to stay. I don't think the others are going to. So that will make things interesting in terms of, the manager's team selection for the weekend. I mean, will Norton play, for example, or will he just think, right, Connor Roberts is going to play because he's the future and he's still going to be here beyond the month. So, it definitely makes things, interesting, doesn't it?
One thing I will say is that with the fixture congestion we've got coming up, I'm not sure we've got the luxury really of, benching players just because they may not be here at the end of this season.
Maybe, but he still may say no to playing, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we've not heard anything about that, so I would hope that our players would all say yeah. But like we said, other clubs are finding it difficult to persuade their players to. One of the things I'll say is that actually the Swans are still in with a shout to the playoffs, so it may appeal to some of them. Think, do you know what? If we do squeeze into the playoffs and who knows, maybe get a win to go up to the Premier League, which isn't impossible. Suddenly there are more lucrative contracts on the table, and perhaps that's a better option than what they would have gotten by moving elsewhere. So that's maybe something that may persuade them to give it their all for the coming month. Who knows? I mean, there are a lot of different permutations going on here, and it just complicates an already very complicated situation, doesn't it? Looking at the game and looking at the opposition, Steve, Middlesbrough are probably one of those teams that were praying for the season to be abandoned, if we're being honest, because they are just 2 points above the relegation zone. Going into this weekend, they are right in the mix at the bottom of the table. They have spent some time actually in the bottom three. They are the league's lowest scorers. It's really well. I'm just saying that they've had a really miserable season. We've already said anything can happen this weekend, and when the Swans are involved, anything can happen most weekends. Middlesbrough have been a troubled side, but they're one of these teams who'll probably think, do you know what, this is a new start, this is a chance for us to get our act together, this is a chance for us to come back full of energy. They've got players come back from injury. I mean, Patrick Roberts is coming back, who's a big boost, a very good player, very creative influence in the team. They've got pretty much everybody fit in that squad. They're going to be looking forward to this game, you think. They're going to be looking at this and probably looking at our form and thinking, do you know what, this is a chance for us to make a statement and get off to a good start, give us a bit of momentum going into the final 9 games.
Yeah, well, the words must win are going to get mentioned at some point. That was a good time to mention it, really, I suppose. We have to start well, I think, if we're going to get into those playoff places. I mean, there's 9 games left. We surely got to think we need at least 6 wins, I would have thought, if we are serious about getting in there. And obviously, we've got to face some of the sides that are around us. Obviously, if we can win those games, then that would be great. Obviously, a big help for us. But at the same time, if we're playing against sides that, are low down in the table, obviously Middlesbrough first and then Luton the week after, we have to be targeting winning both of those games from my point of view. I mean, if we're serious about getting in there, because there's not many games left, and we need points on the board. There's no two ways about it. And if we start well, might just get that momentum, and then it gets you ticking over. Obviously, that happened at the start of the season, didn't it? So I think that's our best chance, if I'm being honest with you. We need a minimum of 4 points, I would say, from the first 2, but we need to. But I don't want to see us going up there and thinking, right, let's settle down, make sure we come away like with a point. It wouldn't necessarily be a bad result in isolation, but I think if, let's use an example, if we're drawing with 20 minutes to go, from my point of view, we need to be trying to force the issue if we're serious about getting in the playoffs. We can't be going, this is a good point, we'll make up the difference further down the line. None of that. We need to be basically going for it and trying to make sure that we win the game.
I agree, because when you look at that table, it's so congested. If we don't pick up 3 points, I know that a lot of the teams around us in the table were in similarly bad form going into the break. The likes of Brentford, Preston, Nottingham Forest a little bit higher up, really dropping points week in, week out. But with so many teams there, they're just 6 points separating 6th and 13th. Not all of those teams are going to be losing. And if we drop points this weekend, that 3-point gap, which at the moment looks okay and looks like a manageable gap that we can bridge, suddenly that 3-point gap is likely to extend to a 5 or 6 point gap. So I think I think even a draw this weekend is just going to put us on the back foot. It's not going to rule us out of the playoffs, but it's going to really put us on the back foot. And that potential excitement that you have going into these final games, thinking, okay, we're in with a shot. Suddenly that shot looks like a long shot. And it's, we can very, very quickly find the rest of this season turning entirely pointless very, very quickly. So I agree with you. I think a good start is absolutely essential. If we do not get wins early on in this restarted period, then we're not going to have any kind of chance of making the playoffs. It is quite a competitive field just because there are so many teams there. We have to be among the strongest starters to stake a claim for the top 6. There's little doubt about that.
Yeah, that is exactly how I see it, really. I mean, if we can close that gap early on, or at least make sure it doesn't get any bigger, then that the belief will come then, won't it? But as we said, we're playing catch up, aren't we? So we have to get ourselves closer to that pack sooner rather than later. Can't afford to let that gap get bigger.
Yeah, I mean, if we're still 3 points off with about 3 or 4 games gone, then suddenly you're thinking, okay, we're definitely right in there. But that's going to be the trick. At the very least, staying within touching reach, and not letting ourselves get too far adrift. Because if we go 5 or 6 points adrift, suddenly that's a very long way to try and claw back. I'll be honest. The first game between these two sides, Steve, was an eventful one. It wasn't the prettiest game of football ever. The most memorable thing about it, of course, was the fact that Middlesbrough were down to 9 men, 2 red cards, those were the red cards that swung the game. Before that, it was 1-1, and it was looking quite tight actually between the two teams, and we were struggling to really create anything. Our one goal had been a penalty, and we weren't really looking like getting many chances, and we needed the red cards just to break down Middlesbrough. And actually, only one team in the bottom half has conceded fewer goals than Middlesbrough. So defensively, they're not too bad. They've only conceded 2 more goals than us, and we've got a pretty decent defensive record ourselves. So yeah, I mean, are there any lessons you think that we can learn from that game? And should we be going into it with a bit more of a creative, adventurous approach? We've obviously got a very different squad now to the one that we had back then. We didn't have Brewster, we didn't have Gallagher, we didn't have Gay back then. So, Brewster and Gallagher in particular are players that you would hope are going to have quite a bit of impact if we are going to succeed in the final games.
Yeah, I just want to see, the team really being given a bit more of a license to, go out and play rather than, what I haven't liked about us a lot this season, to be honest, when I've watched us, is that I don't see a lot of the players having enough options on the ball a lot. So I think that's why we haven't really dominated games as much as we should have done, even though we've had a lot of possession, but it's been pointless possession where we haven't done much. So I think that's what I want to see, that type of thing. And I just want to see players getting forward and taking a few more risks, because if you really want to win games, you do have to take some calculated risks. And I think that's what I really want to see from us in terms of how we approach it, because I think if we do that with the players that we've got, we can definitely hurt teams. And I think that's what's frustrated me a lot this season, really, that someone like Selena being an example. I mean, he's only scored 2 goals and he's only got 2 assists. Both of his goals were in August, and you're thinking, he's obviously been played out wide. Not something I agree with, but apparently the stats suggest he's better when he's out wide.
Which is a nonsense by now. That's a nonsense by now.
Yeah, it's crap. That's what the manager said to the fans for him in January, though. So that's what we're up against. And I think that sort of sums up this manager a little bit. He doesn't quite maybe trust the players in the way that he should, and he's a bit more cautious than I would like.
And one of the things that's actually got me excited about this period is that I'm looking at the team sheet. I'm thinking, okay, we don't have the biggest squad, but we've got some good players. We've got some players here who can harm teams. And we've only scored 45 goals this season, which, in my opinion, is way lower than what it should be, considering the attacking talent we've got. We've got players like Andre Ayew, we've got players like Selena, we've got players like Gallagher, and up front you've got Brewster, who we've already seen is a very good young striker. He knows how to find the back of the net. If you give him chances, he will score. And I just don't think we've managed to get the best out of all of those at the same time, really.
We still don't know his best team.
We do. Well, we still don't. I mean, I've named 3 number 10s there, possibly. You can argue long and hard about where his best position is. Nobody really knows what his best position is. But Selena and Gallagher, both really good, creative, attack-minded players. They should be able to harm any team in this division. They should be able to cause problems for absolutely anybody. And too often this season, we've been the team that's holding on. We've been the team that's, really struggling to create anything. And that it doesn't really make sense. It shouldn't really be like that. And that's us not getting the best out of our attacking players and not playing a system that gets the best out of our attacking players. I'm not too concerned about the defence. We've got one of the top 5 goalkeepers in the division between the sticks. We've got a very able defence, including some very, very good players. Midfield is a problem and has been all season. And I think that may have contributed to our problems up front, because if you don't have that foundation in midfield and that dominance in midfield, the attacking players then aren't going to get as much of the ball. They're not going to get the ball in as good a position, and they're going to struggle a bit more. So that's contributed to it. But still, I mean, when you look at the players we've got, surely the likes of Ayew, Gallagher, Selena, Brewster should be able to cause problems for a team like Middlesbrough.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, this is an issue I agree with, really, in terms of how we've set up all season. I think I did say it before football stopped, really. I think, given what we've got, I do wonder if a wing-back type formation would suit us better, because then it would give us that little bit more protection at centre-half. Obviously, because out wide is an area where we've struggled. Obviously, Ayew was played there. He can do all right there, but it's not really him, I don't think. And I think it would give us an option to play him in a 2 up front alongside Brewster. Selena could stop being played out wide where he should not be playing and play as a number 10. You could play with Gallagher and Grimes in behind. Like I said, then you'd have the width from the full-backs, the likes of Roberts, and I suppose maybe Bidwell would then play the other side. But I honestly think that would be like a good way of getting our better players all into the same team. But unfortunately, we haven't really tried it. But one player we should talk about, that if we are going to play with wingers, there really could be a player for us is Jordan Garrick. Like, he gives us that pace that we haven't really got from elsewhere. He has made things happen. So, we could see something from him. And if we are going to play with wide men, I'd like him to be one of them, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one with Garrick, because much of his best, I mean, he hasn't had many games this season because of injury, but much of his impact, he's been a really good impact sub. Quite a few games he's come on, injected a bit of pace, but direct running. He's won his penalties, scored goals, contributed to goals. He's really had an impact on games, and he's totally different to anything else we have. I mean, the only other player I'd say is Aldo Kalulu, who was showing some promising signs possibly before the break. I mean, 1 or 2 games he was looking better and looking a bit more settled. He's got a bit of pace. He's got a bit of trickery. So possibly we'll see a bit more of him in this period. But I think those kind of players are going to be key. Those players that can just inject a bit of pace into the game. Because Garrick, I mean, he's lightning fast. He's also quite intelligent with his running as well. And he'll time a run pretty well. And he's the kind of player that defenders just do not want to play against. And again, the kind of player that we don't really have in abundance. Last season, one of the things that really worked in our favour was that we had a lot of pace in the team. Mainly Dan James just blasting it down the wing. That's been an issue this season, that there hasn't been much pace, and it's so much more difficult in this division to break down teams if you don't have that player who can just turn on the burners and go past players. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'd be amazed if after a 3-month break to really get over his injury, I'd be amazed if we don't see a hefty chunk of Jordan Garrick this weekend. I mean, are there any players other than the ones we've named who have not really featured as much as we expected perhaps this season, who may feel that they've got a chance in this break and may see this as a kind of a rebirth for their Swansea City careers?
That's the sort of a difficult one, really. I don't think anyone massively springs to mind. I mean, like Fulton was in the team early in the season and did a reasonable job. So I suppose we haven't, he probably hasn't then kicked on as much as he would have hoped. And obviously when someone like Gallagher comes in, it's someone has to miss out as well then, don't they? Obviously, but Byers, I suppose, it's a big chance, isn't it? Because he should really feel like it is, because he wasn't going to kick a ball again, was he, this season? So it's one for him. And then I suppose the other ones really are probably ones that departed in January, aren't they? Because, we don't have the biggest squad. That's, as you said before, really. I think what we do have is some good players in a few positions, but the strength and depth is, in general, apart from the centre half, is quite poor. So that is a bit of an issue for us, really. So we need everybody to stay fit, really, don't we?
Absolutely. One other player for whom this is a big period, I would say, is Matt Grimes. He's club captain. He has come in for a bit of criticism this season. Some of it fair and some of it unfair, I would say. But I think it's definitely fair to say he's not reached the heights of last season. And I think he has struggled at times this season. Now is a time for him really to not only rediscover his best form personally, but also to lead this team and to be that that strong presence in the dressing room, because it's going to be needed. We're going to need strong personalities during this period, because the games are going to be so demanding, because the fixture list is so hectic, and he's going to have to earn his corner. It's a chance for him to prove himself, because I think there are a lot of people who really doubt, I think it's fair to say, his suitability for the captaincy, I guess is the right way of putting it. I guess this is a chance for him to prove doubters wrong in that respect.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, if I'm honest, I don't think I would have given him the captaincy. It's not so much a slight on him. I just felt that Van der Horn was the better option, in all honesty. But I suppose there was a possibility, wasn't there, that Cooper thought he could leave before the window was shut at the start of the season. Then if you've named someone as captain that you think could go, then I suppose it is a difficult one. So I don't think Grimes was necessarily a bad choice for it, but at the same time I wouldn't have given it to him. But I suppose he hasn't been as good this year. That's not something that I disagree with. I suppose I will stick up for him in the sense that we have played differently this year. He hasn't had as many options on the ball as he did previously, and that hurts you. I mean, he has given the ball away a little bit sloppily, but at the same time, if you haven't got the options to give a player the ball, or certainly not good options, then the chances of you making a misplaced pass are higher then as well. So, it's interesting in that sense. I don't know if you read something on The Athletic a few weeks back. There was a quote from an unnamed Swansea player about Graham Potter. Basically, the player had labelled him as a bit of a genius in terms of playing different systems, playing players in positions they wouldn't have usually played, and it was all working. And I don't know who said it, obviously, but I wouldn't be too surprised if that was Grimes. And obviously, it's an unnamed Swansea player, which obviously tells you that it's unnamed because he doesn't want the current manager to see it. So, because it might look like a little bit of a dig at him, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was Grimes. I've got to be honest with you, because I think he's one of the players who probably hasn't enjoyed it as much this year, and I wouldn't blame him if he hadn't, really, because I think most people probably do feel the same, if they're honest.
Yeah, that's the point, though. I mean, it could be any number of players. If I'm being honest, I mean, it could be Grimes, it could be Selena, it could be anybody really. If I'm being honest, Connor Roberts certainly hasn't enjoyed the same kind of success under Potter as he did under Cooper as he did under Potter. And I think that's one of the concerns I have actually, is that any kind of chance to sort of readdress tactical flaws in the team, which have been an issue definitely this season. I'm not sure we've had really enough time to do that, because I mean, the preseason, what little preseason we've had in preparation for these games, probably mostly been spent checking out fitness and making sure that everybody's able to cope with the physical demands of the next few games. So I would have liked, in an ideal world, for the team to really look at formation, tactics, and ask, okay, what can we do to get the best out of the players here? But I doubt that opportunity's been available to them, if I'm being honest, because it's just been rushed, this return. Let's go straight into a prediction. This is something we have not done, Steve, for a very long time. A score prediction. I mean, Middlesbrough, they're right down the bottom. Jonathan Woodgate's had a really difficult start to managerial life this season. Lowest scorers in the division. One of their best players, Daniel Ayala, is not going to be involved for contractual reasons. But on the other hand, I mean, our away form has not been as good as it was at the start of the season. We've got one win in our last 9. And of course, both teams are coming back into it off the back of a 3-month hiatus. So, I mean, it's difficult to make a prediction, I know, but I'm going to ask you for one anyway.
I think this is arguably one of the hardest predictions you could ever have, because it's just, we're not really going on a lot, are we? I'm going to say a bad 0-0, but
don't.
I could be wrong.
Don't. I can't cope after 3 months away. I can't cope with a 0-0. It would be so Swansea. I mean, the one thing I say,
have a goal celebration. That's what I want.
Yes. Can we like have
a meaningful goal?
I want to see Leon Britton pretend to goad the home fans. I'd love to see that. That would be that would be a really good celebration. I just want to be able to know what it feels like to celebrate the goal again, to actually watch the ball hit the back of the net and celebrate it. I mean, I've been watching the Bundesliga for the last few weeks, but I don't have a Bundesliga team. I'm just watching it for the fun of it. I've not been able to get that emotionally invested in it. That's going to change on Saturday. I hope it's not an 0-0. I really hope it's not an 0-0, but I'm not going to say. I can understand your thinking. I'm going to hope that we come back refreshed, that our youngsters come back, fit and raring to go and pumped up. And I'm hoping that we will get a 2-1 win away at Middlesbrough. I would love for that to happen. I think if that does happen, then it suddenly kickstarts a playoff push. But I'm not, you can't be confident. You might as well pick a scoreline out of a hat, because we've got so little to go on looking at this game. But that's one of the intriguing things about it. And we've seen in the Bundesliga over the past few weeks, where teams which were doing very, very well before the break have seen their form collapse. They've not been able to adapt to the new surroundings, to the new way of doing things. And teams which were struggling have suddenly been able to string a few wins together. And the same thing is going to happen in the Championship. Teams which were in really bad form beforehand are going to put wins together, and teams which are riding high are going to suffer some kind of crash. For some teams, this break is going to work out brilliantly. For others, it's going to destroy their season. For the sake of Swansea, let's hope that it's going to make our season. I mean, just looking ahead, Steve, beyond Middlesbrough, what should we realistically expect from the coming season? I mean, because the two of us, I think, were losing a lot of hope about the playoffs before this. I think we were really giving up on it basically before this break. But we've come back and we're 3 points off, and it's a new start, etc. Are the Swans, with their squad size and with the players that we've got available and with the amount of competition, are we the kind of team that you've you think neutrals would expect to do well in this period?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, because if you look at the players that we've got, obviously there's a few left over from the Prem, and then there's a few high-profile loans, isn't it? So, we probably are a team from the outside that people look at and think, well, they've got players there that can do damage. But obviously, I mean, if you look at the stat I keep coming back to, is that since the end of August, we have only beaten one side in the top half of the table. Thank God that was Cardiff. But you can't hide from that stat. That's 31 games. I mean, it's shocking, really. I mean, I can't think of another way to describe it. I mean, I think, and the last time we beat a team who were above us in the league at that time were Leeds, and unbelievably, we were second in the table. So there were only one team above us. But since then, we can't do a number on anybody. So that's what does concern me mainly going forward. As much as I think we can do better than what we're doing, which is what I'd say is the most frustrating thing. But I mean, you can't hide from those facts. I mean, it just tells us any time we come up against anybody half decent, we just can't win. And we've been close a couple of times because obviously there's been late goals, and then Blackburn was one. I think that was the last away game we had before this whole thing happened where we've conceded in the last minute. But it's just happened too many times in terms of we seem to fail in those type of games, and obviously away from home as well. Since the start of November, I think it's 1 win in 9. Whereas before that, we've won 4, I think, and drawn 4 of those first 8 away games, and we've slipped up, haven't we? We're no longer, the form from early in the season is a distant memory, and I bet we'd be bottom 6 if the season started in September. So, you can't hide from those facts, really. I don't think.
Yeah. We are requiring a turnaround in form, and that's why, again, the next 2 games against Middlesbrough and Luton, 2 teams battling it out the bottom, although in Luton's case, a team which one of those teams who were looking pretty good before the break, and weirdly, they're going to have a new manager as well when they play us. I think they're the only team in the Championship who've changed managers in this break. I think I'm right in saying that. But those 2 games, I mean, every game is massive, really, but those 2 games are massive because they then set us up for that big match away at the Den against Millwall, who are one of the teams above us in the table, one of the teams competing against us for a top 6 spot. I mean, we need to win the next 2 games to make sure that we're in the best possible position going into that we've got the confidence to actually take on Millwall and beat them at the Den, really, don't we? And that's why both of us, we've stressed it all podcast, a good start to this to these 9 games is absolutely essential, because if we lose the next 2 games, then that's it, and we've got pretty much nothing to play for the remaining games, haven't we?
Well, if we lose the next 2, are the next 7 must win? That's the question I would put to you, Guto.
I'd argue that if we lose the next 2 games, then even if we win the last 7, which realistically is not going to happen, I'd say we're still struggling to get into the top 6.
I don't know. I think if we did win those 7, we wouldn't. But maybe we would, because you'd have to look at it. We'd have to beat the teams around us, wouldn't we?
That's the one thing that we'd have going for us. And in that respect,
would bring you into it.
Yeah, and in that respect, again, if we can get some good results over the coming 2 games, suddenly we've got a lot of games against the teams above us in the table to try and claw back some of that lost ground.
You're definitely looking at that Millwall game, aren't you, as a must not lose. We can't go there and lose. No,
because that would just give them too much of an advantage. I mean, looking ahead to the other games that we've got then coming up after that, we've got I can't remember actually.
Sheffield Wednesday, is it?
Sheffield Wednesday after that.
Birmingham.
Yeah, I mean,
Sheffield Wednesday and Birmingham are probably 2 of the clubs that don't really have a lot to play for, do they? There's not many in this division that are sort of in no man's land. Although Sheffield Wednesday could get a points deduction, so obviously if that happens, then. And their manager is thought to be under a bit of pressure as well. Their form was pretty dreadful going into the break, and then of course we've got a difficult end to the season with games against Leeds, who may already be promoted by then, if we're being honest. Then Nottingham Forest, who
looked assured of a playoff spot until very recently, but their form has dropped to a point where they're having to scrap it out for a top 6 spot now. Bristol City, another team in the mix, and then Reading, who, well, you'd imagine they'll be safe by then, so that should be a nothing match. But I've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh, we've got difficult fixtures," but at the same time, I mean, there are some very winnable ones there as well. There are a lot of teams there who are not towards the top end of the table, who really should be winnable games if you are looking at getting into the playoff spots, which we should be.
Yeah, you're right. But I mean, we're talking about Leeds, Forest, Bristol City, Millwall, 4 teams in the top half. So we're going to have to break that hoodoo that we seem to have at the moment, aren't we? Where, we're going to have to win a couple of those games at least, I would have thought, to get ourselves in there. So I think that's what the problem is. And obviously, when Leeds especially, you would say, is a very difficult game because they're probably the best side in the division, aren't they? So, there's definitely winnable games in there, and obviously the first 2 do look like winnable, which is a good thing because you wouldn't want to start off with a loss. So there's definitely points up for grabs there, but we're going to have to turn our form around, really, as you've said, because something will have to change if we're going to get in there. But I mean, if we do start well, then the gloves are off, I suppose, and we'll see what happens. But if we don't, then I think within about 3 or 4 games, I think things will be pretty much done, won't they?
Yeah, definitely. One final question. I mean, have you got, after 3 months away, usually we'd be looking forward to actually going to the stadium and cheering on the Swans, but have you got anything planned for Saturday to go along with the match? Any special preparations you're making for the restart?
No, nothing at all. It's just going to be very strange, isn't it? I mean, just watching a game without fans. I mean, I don't know if the Swans have ever played a game behind closed doors. I'm assuming we haven't. So yeah, it's just going to be very odd watching it without fans. And then if there's a goal, it's just going to feel a little bit weird. Obviously, there'll be a celebration, I'm sure, but it's just going to be odd, isn't it? I mean, it's even when the games are quiet, I just expect to hear that guy who does the very loud and long "Come on, City" at some point, and we're not even going to have that, are we, on Saturday? So
in the Bundesliga, TV companies have been putting fake crowd noise over matches. The Swans need to arrange it so that we get that guy, shouting out every 10 minutes during
we've got to throw in our own half or something.
Come on, City! Like that, just.
I think there was too much passion in that, and it was too short. It's got to be a "Come on, City."
That's the kind of thing that'll really enhance the experience for us watching at home. Really give us that realistic feel.
That's the thing with it. If I hear that, it's like a reassurance, if you know what I mean, of that things are normal.
Do you know what? Before that could be a Twitter question for the next episode. What are the chants that and the kind of sound effects that Swans TV should give us to make us feel like we're at home when we go into the Luton match? Just to make it feel a bit more kind of homely and as if we are there ourselves. That'll be a good Twitter question. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It has been.
Hang on a minute. I've got to cut you short, but there's one thing we have to talk about. Leon Britton.
Jesus Christ, how could we forget Leon? This is something that we did not expect, really. Some strange timing, really, after 3 months away, but the announcement came this week that Leon is leaving the club, leaving his post as, I think, it was basically director of football, really. I mean, Steve, the reasons given were that he wants to spend more time with his family. We're led to believe that there's nothing more to it than that it is simply a case of wanting to spend more time with his family. But, I mean, you were surely as surprised as anybody. And I guess, where do the Swans go from here? Because we've got a summer... we are going to have a transfer window ahead of us. We're probably going to be losing players. We hopefully bring a few players in as well, at least on loan, if not permanently. And we don't have anybody in Leon Britton's position to oversee those deals and oversee that kind of those deals, I guess.
I think from his job point of view, obviously we don't And it's been mentioned what he does, and I think it was a little bit of everything really. And obviously, we don't know how good he was at his job and how vital it was. Like, can it be shared out between other people and stuff like that? I think what's concerning is Leon Britton is obviously a person that everyone at the club loves, and it's a person that we trust, I suppose, as well. At the end of the day, isn't it? So the fact that he's gone is concerning, and I know they've said these things like, there's nothing untoward, he wants a break and all this kind of thing. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I'm quite buying it. I don't know. Just like, it's no secret that our finances are obviously not going to be in the best of states anyway, regardless of the whole virus, which will cost us more money, obviously. And I just wonder if, like, he's gone to the board himself maybe and gone, look, I know financially we're not in a great position. I'll stand down, take one for the team, so you don't have to make as many people redundant or any at all. And I honestly do wonder if that is the case. I think that if that is the case, I can understand why they wouldn't tell us either, because obviously it's going to alarm people and everything like that. It has to really have come from Leon, but I really got my doubts on this one as to whether they're telling the truth, if I'm being honest with you.
Well, one thing I will say is they've been pretty open about the fact that the club's struggling financially when they wanted, fans to refuse a refund for their season tickets. So, they were making it pretty clear back then that they felt the situation was pretty troublesome. I mean, we don't know what the reasons are beyond what's been said. And like you said, we don't really know how good Leon was at his job. He hadn't really been there that long, and usually somebody in that job, takes a couple of years to prove themselves. So I guess in terms of a legacy, I guess Leon doesn't really leave much in that job. But it's worrying, I think, because I think we've said it quite a lot that it's good to have people who really know the club, legends from the club, people who know it inside out, in various roles within the club, for everything from coaching setup, youth setup to the day-to-day running in the boardroom. I think it is good to have those people that just know the club inside out. And Leon was one of those people. I mean, he is an honorary Jack. He is an adopted Jack. He is one of us. It's a blow that we are losing somebody with that kind of know-how and that kind of relationship with the club. I'd say that at the very least, that is a big blow.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Like I say, it's just we want these. I was hoping that Leon really was going to be the next Alan Curtis and basically be here for 30 years and whatever else. But I'm sure I wouldn't be at all surprised if at some point he does re-enter the fray. I mean, Curtis himself has had various spells where he's worked elsewhere, and then he's always ended up coming back, luckily. But it's not great, is it? Let's be honest about it. I mean, if the reasons are legitimate, no one would begrudge him some sort of a break or anything like that. But I don't think we're going to know for sure at this stage. But I suppose if he's not replaced, or we see more redundancies in the near future, or if we go up and then a statement comes up like Leon's come back, it's like, I had my break and I missed it and all this type of thing, where suddenly 100 million has come into the coffers, then again, it does look highly suspicious. So, I think time will tell as to whether we make our own minds up on what the situation is.
Yeah, sorry to end on a bit of a dampener there with Leon Britton's departure. But the good news, of course, is that the Swans are back in action. Whether or not that is good news is up to you to decide, and we'll definitely know how good it is by the time the Saturday's match is finished. But until then, hopefully you will have a very pleasant afternoon watching the Swans on Saturday. Hopefully we will kick off this restart with a win, and hopefully we can look forward to many more games, big games to come. Join us again next time when we'll be looking back at the Middlesbrough game and looking ahead to Luton Town. Until then, thank you very much for joining us.